Don't leave your money and legacy to chance. And don't ruin your heirs. And definitely don't destroy your legacy. Look, people wait too long to get their legacy planning done. It ends up costing them a bunch of tax and can leave their family in turmoil. And some just feel like they're not wealthy enough to address this. But I started to think about it when I was 19 years old before I was married. Okay, I sound like a nerd here, but I just knew that I planned on being productive and of value, and I wanted to really invest in myself. And I thought, you know, a lot of people end up paying estate taxes. It was just because they procrastinated. And a lot of family turmoil happens because people just don't do the act of love of getting their legacy plan in place. And there's some other issues, like people don't use a specialist. They know some attorney, but if they're not into the estate and legacy planning game, well, that's like, it's a big mistake. And I've seen far too many of these plans that are boilerplate. They say stuff like, oh, when the kids turn 22, 32, and 42, they'll get the distributions. Well, guess what? What if they're going through divorce, or they're in trouble with drugs, or they're just not in a good place and it becomes a problem? Boilerplate can be devastating. And there's just a lot of people that haven't reviewed or updated. Some people haven't updated, had multiple kids, or have a special needs situation with one of their kids. And so they haven't reviewed it. And so it's not really doing them any good, or they just leave it all to legalese. So it's just some attorney that's created a document and no kid's ever going to read it. The legalese is important for the legal system. What about your intentions? What about your contribution? What about the philosophies and lessons you learned along the way? We'll talk about how you can integrate that. A lot of people they could have a better legacy if they simply funded their trust. And if they don't fund their trust, it goes to probate. There are some really famous people like Prince that didn't have a trust. So you can see, like, the $300 million estate is all public view and public knowledge now. And, you know, it just goes through the court system. Now, you also have to understand whether you should use a revocable or an irrevocable trust, because those matter depending on your situation and the amount of liability you face or the amount of assets you have. And there's other things that people miss out on creating their legacy plan, like not having a trust protector, which is critical, or the right trustees or the right managers. And finally, a lot of people just don't plan for a situation where they might be incapacitated and they might leave their family in making really tough decisions that would have been easily handled just by having a legacy and estate plan. So these are important factors. And look, just a little bit of the ream here. It's hard to be wealthy today because the wealthiest people just have so much. Remember when wealth used to be owning a Lamborghini, belonging to a fancy country club, or hang out with people named Mitzi, Mickey, and Muffy? Now it's more like, which billionaire will get to the moon first? Oh, you have $100 million? How quaint. I'm going to spend that on rocket fuel tomorrow. Oh, you own a sports team? Cute. I'm going to live on Mars. You know you're rich when your vacation means leaving the planet. Like, I'm bored. I've been everywhere 27 times. Let's go to space. Seriously, nobody feels poorer than a mediocre rich person. If you're rich, someone else is always richer. How sad is that? Being depressed that you only have $500 million? No one sympathizes with that. Anyone richer than you thinks you're poor, and anyone poorer thinks you're rich. Oh, poor baby, sorry that you can't go to space too. You just have to settle for Ibiza again. Or is it Ibiza? But I want to go to space, Daddy. All right, you don't have to be wealthy to set up a legacy or establish your will and trust. If you don't trust the government to handle your affairs, or want to have everything public knowledge, or if you just don't want to have everything left to chance or tax, then this is something to pay attention to. Here's the first mistake. People not using an attorney that specializes in legacy work. A licensed attorney can do the work, but how good are they at doing that work? It's like, hey, there's professional athletes. But just because you're a pro at basketball doesn't mean you're going to be a pro at football. So yeah, an attorney, they can do the work, but is it the work that is meant to be done by them? People that focus on legacy think about, how do you perpetuate wealth? How do you protect and preserve it? What are the factors beyond just the basics that make the biggest difference for wealthy families? I want someone that's obsessed with that dives into that works on that every single day because it's part of their career and who they are. I call that soul purpose. Our soul purpose is our values, our abilities and passions for the highest context of living. I want people that it's their sole purpose to work in that legacy realm. I'm not just going to say, oh, you went to law school and you do litigation. Do you mind creating this legacy plan for me? Just because they're in your family doesn't make that a good idea, right? The second issue here is a lot of people just don't think they're wealthy enough to address the situation. But you deserve a legacy. And if you don't address this, your heirs are going to be left to address it without instruction. I mean, imagine, like, we get born in this world without a money instruction manual. I mean, that's crazy. But we also don't have like an instruction manual on legacy. And often because of that lack of intention and instruction, there's a lot of confusion. But if you don't set this up, there's some basic things that happen. Like you can establish your guardians for your kids, and think about that. That was the hardest thing for my wife and I to choose, because everyone has good qualities and they could do a good job, but like, who's the perfect fit? We want to be intentional about that and not leave that to the court system. We also want to control timing of inheritance and whether we wanted our kids to inherit anything at all. I don't want my kids to inherit money. I want them to inherit opportunity. I don't want them to have an inheritance. I want there to be a heritage, that our name stands for something, our family stands for something. And I'll get into what that means a little bit more as we get into this. And that control of timing is really important, because there's so many people that are frustrated because they had an inheritance and they blew it. Or I know people that have a huge amount of money they got, but they have no purpose. And so I don't want to leave my kids in a place where they're not incentivized to be value creators in the world. And if you have the right things here, you can protect your assets from creditors. Assets in properly structured trusts are harder for creditors to claim. And you can make sure to manage assets for someone else. So it's ideal if you have dependents who can't manage finances. There might be, minors, or there might be people with special needs. And legacy planning isn't really about how much money you have. It's about who you care about and what you care about. And legacy is about, how do you want to be remembered? So the third mistake here is people just wait too long. I think this is kind of a crazy notion. There's financial advisors out there saying you should buy term insurance and invest the difference. And then when your assets grow to enough, you won't need the insurance. But ironically, these same people might go talk to an attorney in their later years where they built these assets, and the attorney says, you know what, you got an estate tax problem, so you should buy some insurance. Now they're going to buy insurance when they're older and maybe not as healthy. And they probably could just got it as an asset allocation decision that would outperform their bonds by having the right whole life cash value insurance. So it could have been handled as kind of like a efficiency, instead of all of a sudden a deficient amount of money that they need to come up with because they're going to have this tax issue. So don't wait too long, because estate tax is a procrastination tax. Even if you have the type of wealth of Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, if they start early enough with this planning, they don't necessarily have to pay estate tax. No, I know there's some people going, oh, they deserve to pay. Okay, so when they die, the government's just allowed to take their money? Why? They're paying plenty of tax along the way. Sales tax, excise taxes, property taxes, self-employment taxes, all sorts of stuff. So now, why be penalized when they die? So if you have this done early enough and your assets move into this early enough, you won't necessarily have to pay that estate tax, because, like the Rockefellers always said, own nothing, control everything. The trust still allows the family to control things, but they don't necessarily own it from an estate tax perspective. The fourth issue is being boilerplate. Boilerplate is, if you just read a trust, you can kind of predict what's going to be in there. There's some basics that are essential, but there's a lot of things that are instrumental on whether this is going to work or not. So in What Would the Rockefellers Do? Yes, a book I wrote. I was speaking at an event last year, and someone said, hey, what financial books do you recommend? And I recommended 3 books I had written and joked about it. And then this next year they asked me again, and I gave them the same answer. So it's been consistent. They're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, well, I am partial to these things. I have thought about this a lot. This is kind of my area of expertise. I mean, there are other good financial books out there, but yeah, okay, I'm going to recommend mine. But the reason I'm recommending What Would the Rockefellers Do is because it talks about a family constitution. There's this thing called the family legacy rings I discuss in here. At the center of it is the Rockefeller method, but the rings in a Venn diagram really are a family office, which a family office is a cohesive, comprehensive financial team working together on your behalf, so that after you die, it's that same team that would work with your heirs. Now, really wealthy people like the Rockefellers have their own financial team under one roof. And so that's where kind of the family office came from. They've got their own attorneys, accountants, investment advisors, cash flow specialists. I talked to the CPA for the Rockefeller family office, and she was just verifying everything I was writing in the book as being accurate and exactly what they were doing. So That is great. Most people don't have that kind of money, so you can have a fractional family office or a virtual family office. This is something that I built within my multiplier community, is building a financial team that communicate with each other. Even though they have a lot of clients, when they're working with our clients, they communicate together so the client's not like isolated or everything's fragmented. So that's one part of the family legacy ring. The second is a family retreat, which is how do you invest in your heirs? How do you create the right rituals to reinforce certain habits on a daily basis and the right traditions that bring the family back together that you can look forward to? I know during the holidays, that might be the holidays that everybody has, but we create things like this year at Christmas, we did the family roast, but everyone just roasted me. It used to be we used to draw names, but this year I just got it. Everybody roasted me, which was fun and fine. But that's something we look forward to coming back to, our Summer Olympics, where we all get together, play foolish games, and then kind of have a family retreat afterwards. So a family retreat structure is how do you invest in your family and how do you invest in your heirs? But really the family constitution is the third part of this. The family constitution is what are the philosophies that are most important to your family? What are the stories that matter, that show resilience and that, talk about where you came from and how you overcame difficult situations? And how can you leave signposts that are the philosophies and ideas and principles that could be useful so that your heirs don't have to make all the same mistakes? So what could you capture that's the non-monetary assets? That's the family constitution. So leaving money to your heirs without instruction or expectation could be so detrimental. And we're in this ever-evolving world with technology, and the world's quite different now than it was 50 years ago. What's it going to be like 50 years into the future? I can't have an attorney try to predict that or have one legal document do all the work. So the family constitution is this, it's a book, essentially. It's 38 pages, the one that I created for my family, that all the board of trustees and everybody that would be in my kids' lives that would be utilizing this trust could use that as a guidepost, could use it as insight so they can make more dynamic decisions as the world changes, but say, here's who we are, here's what we stand for, here's what we learned. And I want my kids to have freedom and spontaneity, but at the same time, I don't want them to have to make all the same mistakes or be born into financial bondage or have to start over and not learn the lessons that we could then capture and move from generation to generation. Another part of, a boilerplate document is a lot of people aren't addressing their digital assets. I mean, we're just in a different world now. There's so many, on our phone, we pretty much access all the money that we have pretty much because of the way that the online banking works and crypto. So if you don't have your digital assets addressed, that could leave your family in turmoil when you're gone. Maybe not knowing where your Bitcoin is or something like that, right? All right, the next issue after boilerplate is that people just don't review and update their legacy plan enough. I treat it like the dentist, I go get my teeth cleaned, get everything checked out, and I schedule 6 months out, and then we go through it again. So automatically schedule with your legacy planning team so you're reviewing and updating. You might have the wrong beneficiary. I know someone that when they died, their spouse was actually not their first spouse, and the money went to the first spouse because they didn't update the trust. It was all going to the trust, and because the trust wasn't updated, it went to the previous person. So that could be a problem. It might be that, you just have different situations with different family members, and because of special needs, you want to take care of someone that might have issues, whether it's learning disabilities or another form of disability that might require additional attention and support. There's incentives that you can create. Like if my kids read certain books and do reports on those books, they can have extra money. That's an incentive-based planning inside of this. I want to make sure that we have family retreats and we talk about what the updates are and what we're working on and what our family values are and what our family mission statement is and the things that we want to do as a family, the trips that we want to take and what we stand for and what we need to heal from and what our virtues, like this is all part of what we can do. And we can do this aligned with after we go and meet with the attorney and then, all right, here's where we're at right now and here's what's going on with the family. I remember watching a video with David Rockefeller, and he didn't really know how wealthy his family was. He learned that in school, and as soon as he learned, they started inviting him into the family retreats because they were having quarterly retreats as a family. I mean, they're a pretty wealthy family, and it was important for him to be able to be deserving of being an heir so that he didn't just blow the money. That was part of the Rockefeller method. All right, takes me to the sixth issue here, is if you just leave this to the legalese, who's going to read that document? I mean, I read legal documents quite often when I do these cash cabin one-on-one immersions at my cabin to see what's going on. But the legalese is critical to make sure that things are avoiding probate and, it's designed properly to maximize all the right tax things and protection things. But at the same time, like if you start to include the family, my kids chose our family values with us. They were 7 and 9 at the time, but we just had this sheet and we circled it and we talked about it. So it's evolved over time. We chose our family guidance together. So when you include the family and you have a family constitution, there's actually something there that they feel that they're part of. One of the things I did is I filmed a video to my heirs. So when something happens to me and they open up that trust, there's a link where they can watch a video where I'm giving them a message. So there's a connection there. And I hope that my great-great-great-grandkids know who I am, what I stood for, and what I helped to start because of having this intention and working through this. The seventh issue that people face and mistake they make is they don't fund the trust, or I guess maybe not have a trust at all, but sometimes people get a trust, they don't fund it, and they don't transfer assets into it, so they have to have a pour-over will that would say we meant to have it in there, but you can have probate issues. If you don't have one at all, like let's use James Gandolfini, the actor. A lot of people love The Sopranos. Well, he died back in 2013, and he had a $70 million net worth. So he did have a will, but he didn't have a trust for the bulk of his estate. So 80% of his estate went through probate and became public knowledge. And a significant portion was lost to estate taxes. 55% of the state's value went to federal and state taxes due to poor tax planning by not having the estate plan. Okay, so that's an actor. I mean, if you look it up, you'll see there's tons of musicians that the same thing happened, whether it was Jimi Hendrix or, I don't know, I mentioned Prince before, Kurt Cobain. But Howard Hughes, that was a business tycoon, right? He died back in 1976. At that time, his estate was valued at $2.5 billion. It's probably like $12 billion today. Here's the issue. He didn't even have a valid will. He did have like a basic handwritten thing, but it turned out that might have been forgery, so it wasn't accepted. He didn't really have clear heirs, so there was over 400 people that came forward claiming inheritance rights. The probate process, listen to this, lasted 34 years, and eventually the estate was divided among 22 cousins. Legal fees and court costs consumed a large portion of the estate, a $2.5 billion estate. So if you have these, you can avoid probate. Then all your information doesn't become public knowledge. You can avoid estate taxes. So it's not just going back to the government. Here's the eighth mistake that people make. Not distinguishing between revocable and irrevocable. So when does it make sense? Well, irrevocable can help with estate tax reduction because assets are transferred to an irrevocable trust that are removed from your taxable estate. In the old days, like you had things called ILITs, irrevocable life insurance trusts. They still exist today. But you can't touch your cash value because it's irrevocable. But now you can have a domestic asset protection trust, for example, in the United States, and you still get to control the distribution trustee that can give you access to your money, but it's actually not your money, it's the trust money. But if they say no, you can fire them and hire someone new. So it's arm's length, which means you own nothing, but you still control everything. That Rockefeller methodology or philosophy. So if you have an irrevocable, it can reduce your estate tax liability, especially for really high net worth individuals. There's protection from creditors and lawsuits. Assets in an irrevocable trust are generally protected from legal claims and judgments. It's really good for professionals at higher risk of lawsuit. Think about like doctors, even think about like business owners. There's asset protection for beneficiaries, right? When they have creditors or divorce settlements or mismanagement. So it can ensure funds are used responsibly, especially like if you have young kids, right? Or just financially inexperienced beneficiaries. I don't want my kids just to get a boatload of cash. I want them to be able to borrow from our family's bank that I have in cash value insurance, and then they could pay that back. They can use it for business ventures, for down payments on a home. They can use it for education, especially outside of the classroom. That helps them in their career and advancing their skill sets. And now we can earn that interest rather than pay it to a bank, give them preferred interest rates, and then even put insurance on them so that every time someone in my family dies, it replenishes the trust. So we're thinking about how we preserve this for future generations. Now, when you have an asset protection trust, you can, in some cases, allow assets to grow tax-free within the trust. You can protect generational wealth from estate taxes and mismanagement. All right, let's move on to the next issue. Is a lot of people don't really consider their trustees. So if you have a Rockefeller method trust, well, you might want to have an insurance trustee and separately an investment trustee because you want to avoid having taxation issues. And you also have different factors here. Inside of my plan, I also have a trust protector, which can veto, because I have a board of trustees. And I have the people that I'm going, hey, if I'm not around, who would be the best to help my wife and my kids in a way that I would have taught my kids, but they represent some or edify some aspect or value that I have? Well, they can then read my family constitution and make those choices. But if for any reason they start getting speculative or they want to invest in things that are outside of what my intentions were, the trust protector can veto that. So having different distribution trustees, which could be the very people that give you access to the money or the people that help influence your heirs if you're not around, or even separate the different types of activities that are going on inside of the trust, those are critical. Now, the 10th issue is some people just don't plan for incapacity. There was the Terry Schiavo issue where, hooked up and kind of a vegetable, but there was this argument and there's just years and years of prolonging life. A medical directive could have said what to do. When my grandfather died, he had a medical directive, and that said whether or not to pull the plug or not when he was a certain level. My grandma was really struggling. She wouldn't want to make that decision, but they talked about it beforehand. It was in the medical directive, took it out of the family's hand, and then everybody was comfortable with such a tough situation. A power of attorney is also part of planning for incapacity. So you can have a springing power of attorney that, let's say that I can't make decisions, I have some issue that's going on. My wife can then sign for me and doesn't have to go through the courts to get access to all the businesses and business accounts. Or just a straight up power of attorney to someone could work as well. Now, here's a bonus thing that's a mistake that I just want to make sure to point out. A lot of people just don't want to meet with their attorneys because they're getting tired of being charged by the minute. So you could actually have someone charge you a fee for a Rockefeller method trust. And the Rockefeller method trust would be, you have a death benefit on you, you have death benefit on your kids. Every time someone dies, it replenishes the trust, and the trust gives preferred interest rates, and it's got to be in the right state, so it's perpetual. But now you can pass on wealth for generations. See, the Vanderbilts destroyed wealth. They had more money than the U.S. Treasury at one time, yet when Cornelius died, he passed on his money to his eldest son. 9 years later, he doubled his estate, then he died. 54 years later, a Vanderbilt died broke, and they just lost so much wealth because they had no plan. They had no trust. They had no family office. They didn't know the family legacy rings. Let's look at the Rockefeller family, though. Entering their 7th generation of wealth, and even the people that work for the Rockefellers, they've been passing on wealth for generations using the Rockefeller method that I demonstrate right here in this book. What would the Rockefellers do? With my good buddy and co-author, Michael Isom. So if you go WWRD at Garrett B. Gunderson on Instagram, we'll hook you up with a PDF if you want to buy a copy or get the audiobook. Just cover the shipping and we'll handle the rest. But the Rockefeller method is a great way using certainty and the economic value of certainty to pass on wealth for generations to come. But when you add these elements of a family constitution and of a family retreat structure, it makes all the difference. And I share parts of my family constitution here in the book, so you can hopefully be inspired and take it if you want it, but create your own. What matters to you and your family? And what you get is a legacy builders course if you actually buy the book that has the basic framework of the questions to pick out the distribution trustees, to start to initiate and create your family constitution. If you're like, man, this sounds like a lot of work, don't worry, one of my partners, Matt, built AI tools to build the family crest, the family constitution. And so if you get our Legacy Builders Essentials course, which is a step up, it's a couple $100, you'll have those AI tools to help get this done in no time. Like, I had a blank sheet of paper, wrote 52 pages, harder than any other book I ever written, was my family constitution. Over time, I was able to shorten it down to 38, make it more succinct, and to share that with you, I'm honored to do that and excited to do that. So, grab the book. The best thing is I have this Rich Life bundle, which is my 3 most popular books right here. And you also get the Legacy Builders course, and you would also get an Investor DNA course inside of Killing Sacred Cows, and that's like $44.90. So, if you just join my Rich Life newsletter at garrettgunderson.com, and then it'll say, hey, would you like the Rich Life bundle? If you're in the United States, we mail those 3 copies. We get you the 2 courses, and spoil the surprise, but we'll even give you the 3 audiobooks. All right? So here's the deal. If you wait too long, it's a problem. If you don't feel like you're wealthy enough, you got to value yourself and start doing these things now, because you get good habits And also plan to be successful and do what successful people do today, even if it's a smaller scale. Make sure you use the specialist. Get the right attorney. If you don't have one, we've got great ones in our program Multiplier. We've got the best. I mean, it will be amazing for you to be able to have the Rockefeller Method attorneys. And if you upgrade on the Legacy Method course, you'll see that I actually interview the attorney and talk about the best states to do this, how to set up the Rockefeller Method. With the trustees, we go into a lot more detail. Don't let it be boilerplate. Have it be who you are and your family. This is your legacy. Don't just leave it to chance. Don't just let an attorney write about it. Really go through the course, answer the questions. Then review and update this at least every year. And don't just leave it to legalese, and make sure you're actually funding the trust and do the work afterwards, changing the name on the bank accounts, deeding assets into it, just some basic things like that. And then as you get more successful, you're probably going to want an irrevocable trust versus revocable, but a revocable is a great place to start. You'll want to look at the right trustees and trust protectors and, get the right managers. So that's the recap, but here's the rant. I'm just tired of, it's just frustrating to see this be an intimidating topic, reserved for the uber wealthy, the ultra high net worth individuals. No, you deserve a legacy. You're valuable. You're a value creator. You're one good choice. You're being intentional away from changing your family's financial future and their destiny. You don't get a second chance to build a life you love and create a legacy that lasts. Yeah, we'll make mistakes along the way. Capture those, learn from those lessons, teach those lessons, have a family constitution, get your legacy plan in order, a will, a trust, your medical directive, your power of attorney. This is all available to you. I mean, for as little as, I know it's a big investment for some, but others it's not, as little as $5,000. $5,000 and a little bit of time can be all the difference for your family. Even if it was one day a year, $5,000 up front and a couple $100s per year, it could be a game changer worth millions and millions of dollars for generations to come. My wife's always worried, well, with inflation, what's going to happen with housing and what's that going to do for our kids? Guess what? We've been making these choices early. You'll see right in the very first part of the Legacy Builders course, there's different ways that you could pay your kids and what you could pay them to do, and you can teach them really healthy habits, and that can start to fund their Rockefeller Method plan. I pay my kids for doing all sorts of great things like helping me memorize things when I'm going up on stage or producing this very podcast or, opening for me at a comedy show. Or there's a number of factors that I've been able to teach them great habits, pay them for that, build out a cash value plan for them that locks in their death benefit, and then know that we have this family bank plan with our family constitution inside of the trust that I don't feel like my family has to start over. They're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. It's part of the process. We just don't have to make all the mistakes if we have the time and attention to this and give the gift of love of just investing time with each other. So what would Jesus do? That's the next thing, right? What would money Jesus do? Look, for years when people would tell me I look like Jesus, I always respond the same way. I know I got the looks, just not the powers. I took my kids on this trip, and it was a survival camping trip, and they were worried that we're going to starve. I remember that last night, I would have given anything for Jesus' multiplying fish power. We caught a fish. One fish. Imagine what I could have done if I could have multiplied that. I'd be like the camp hero, right? Fish anyone? The only thing better than that fish trick would have been the water into wine move. Best I can do is turn water into pee. But turning water into wine, that was probably a thankless miracle though, right? You create wine out of thin air. There'd still be someone like, just something sweeter like a white Zin or a Riesling. So what would money Jesus do? Look, we watched it in his life. Focus on rituals. What are the daily habits that help you invest in your kids? When our kids were little, it's at the end of the day, what was your high and your low for the day? Breakfast, dinner as a family, drives to school or walks to school, depending on which year it was. The conversations we have. I always say, what are you grateful for? What would make today a great day? These were the rituals that would reinforce who we are as a family. The traditions were everything from our cabin trips to our annual, we go to Europe every year. You don't have to have the money to go to Europe. It's just what are your traditions that bring your family together in a way that they look forward to it? That's part of why I bought this cabin. So we could come together, we could play games, we could hang out, but then we'd have some of those profound conversations on the drive. And we even create a family crest. It sits right above the mantle. Start small. Start anywhere. I mean, what can you do on a daily basis to invest in your heirs? What are those rituals that would reinforce who you are as a family? What are the stories that are important to tell? Tell them about the tough times along the way. I have a friend, Chris Smith. He always talks about, you want to kill a family, you kill the chief storyteller. And he talks about, you got to teach about resilience by talking about the difficulties that you overcame so people don't feel isolated and alone when they go through difficulty. My advice, live your legacy. What do you want your life to look like? What is a life that you love? Live by that example. Enjoy life along the way. Set up regular meetings with your team. But we set up family meetings. Sometimes now they're a little bit more chill as my kids are older in the hot tub or on the drive to the cabin. But we used to have formal family meetings, pass around this little, it was like a little stuffed animal heart thing, and whoever got that, it was their turn to talk. We'd go through what they're grateful for, and then we talk about, what are you working on this week that we could help you with? You know, what's something you could compliment your mom or your brother on? How am I doing as a dad on a scale of 1 to 10? What can I do to improve? Why don't we initiate a guys' night? What do you want to do for guys' night? What are you most excited about this year? What are you struggling with? These are the conversations we have in a family meeting. This is part of the legacy. So come together as a family. Tell the stories. Have the conversations. Ask the questions. But also make sure to set up your will, your trust, and add that family constitution. And get the attorney that knows the Rockefeller method. If you're not sure, follow the links and the prompts in this book. We'll be sure to help you out.